Hi, everybody. My name's Karlee Porter, and I am the inventor and author of the free motion quilting technique called graffiti quilting. Graffiti quilting is a free motion quilting technique where you take all of the different quilting motifs that you know how to quilt and you combine them together all into one unified quilt. This is a very free form quilting process that I like because you don't have to plan out too much before you can go on your free motion quilting journey. So let me give you a little bit of history behind how graffiti quilting came about. In 2014, I wrote my first book, Graffiti Quilting. But my journey as an artist started much before that. I've always been an artist from a very young age. I remember picking up crayons and coloring books and notebooks and pencils and watercolor paints and really just loving doing visual art, whatever that happened to look like. So I was always doing art from a young age, and I knew that when I grew up, I wanted to be an artist of some sort. In 2009 is when I beheld my first quilting machine, and my head exploded from that point forward. And I took all of the designs that I was doing in my sketchbooks and my notebooks and on the back of my friends' sweaters and on our pencil boxes, and I started applying all of those designs from there onto fabric with thread. And the more that I was doing that kind of work and showing it to people, the more people just kept saying, "How do you do that? How do you do that?" And I thought, man, I really should try to write down and verbalize and vocalize exactly what it is that I'm doing. This quilt here is one of my very favorite quilts because it was the very first graffiti quilting quilt that I realized there was more rhyme and reason to what I was doing than just doodling on fabric. And that's why I chose it as the cover quilt for my first book. So in 2014, right after I published this book, graffiti quilting kind of took off like wildfire. I even had a quilt that hung in the Houston International Quilt Festival in the fall of 2014 that showcased the graffiti quilting style, and that was a huge honor. But as people started to see that there was a book available, it really took off like wildfire. And in the summer of 2015, I was invited to do an international teaching tour of graffiti quilting. I got to go to Canada and England and Ireland and Scotland, and then I did a whole tour across the southern coast of Australia teaching graffiti quilting. It was incredible. So, as I was teaching graffiti quilting to people all over, I was getting to know those quilters more and getting to understand just kind of the process of learning how to do a new free motion quilting technique. And I was seeing that time and time again, as I was teaching, there were even more things kind of coming out of me and my own thought process that was not included in the book. And I just kept thinking, okay, I need to keep track of those things because that way when I'm teaching, as a companion to the book, I can make sure that all of the graffiti quilting information that I have, I can convey to the students. So after a few years in 2017, I decided it was time to publish another graffiti quilting book. So in 2017, Graffiti Quilting Volume 2 was born. It includes everything that I had in Volume 1, plus all of those things in my brain that were manifesting throughout the course of my teaching experiences all across the world. So after this book was published, I continued to teach. I got to teach internationally again. I went to Norway and Italy and Greece and still statewide as well, which was so, so cool. It was really nice to be able to be with those students in the studio space. But the thing that was really hard about it is that because we had a very limited amount of time together, it was kind of a 2 day whirlwind of me forcing my students to drink from a fire hose because there was just so much within the technique that I wanted to convey, and we had a very limited amount of time. So I decided in 2017 that I would come up with a platform to teach remotely or teach online so that people all over the world who really wanted to learn graffiti quilting could have it accessible to them without me having to travel all over the world. As much as I loved traveling, it was really, really hard too. My husband and I were also at this time planning our family and hoping to have a kid or two or maybe three. And so teaching online was a really great way that I could not only connect with my audience and be accessible, but also be at home with my family. But the thing that I learned about teaching online is that instead of having to force feed everybody over the course of a 2-day period with an in-person class, I could really break things apart and kind of slow them down and help my students really internalize the processes that we were talking about. And that was a really, really wonderful setup to do that. So from 2017 and all the way through COVID, I continued to teach online, with graffiti quilting being my most popular class. And I just had those same feelings that I had before I published volume 2, where time was going on and the technique was continuing to flow and evolve and open itself up to me, that I thought there's really still so much more that I didn't even know in 2017 when I did the updated version. I didn't even know what I didn't know. And so I thought it's high time that I publish another book. And now we have Graffiti Quilting, the third edition. And as you can see, this book is quite a bit larger than the previous two. So the first book was about 80 pages. The second book was about 90 pages or so. The new book is 342 pages. Now, the cool thing about this is I was not necessarily anticipating that when I started writing the third edition book. But as I really started to dive deeper into every little aspect of the graffiti quilting process, there was just more and more and more that kept flowing out of me. I mean, granted, the span between book 1 and book 2 was about 3 years, and then the span between book 2 and book 3 is 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So a good 7 years. 2024 marks the 10-year anniversary of the birth of graffiti quilting. So this is super, super exciting for me. This new book is not just a book. It is an immersive free motion quilting experience. And I'm really excited to show you what I've got in it. So this book is really a manifestation of the last 10 years of my free motion quilting journey. Let me show you a little bit about what's inside. This book consists of 10 different sections, all of which will help you on your free motion quilting journey. So the very first section, of course, is talking about tools and materials. But before I show you that, I want to show you just how genius this book is. So throughout the book, there are tons of QR codes. So when you're working through the content, you can scan the QR codes and it will take you to additional information, videos, photos that I couldn't print in a book. I think this is totally genius and I'm like super proud about it because with a QR code, there's just so much content that you can't print in a tangible book. And so to be able to still include all of that information and have it all live within the QR code that you can access at any point in time as you're working through the book is just like so awesome. So you'll find these QR codes all throughout the book as you're working through the graffiti quilting curriculum. So the first section of the book talks all about tools and materials. And I like to really break things down and talk about why I use certain things at certain times, um, when it is best to try out different materials. And I just really break down that process into very simple steps. Now, the second section, I really, really love this section because I find that with free motion quilting, regardless of what style of quilting you're doing, if you're fighting with your machine or you're not sure how to get good stitches, even if the shapes of your quilting are beautiful and perfect, if your tension is not set well, you're going to be sad with the end result. So I found that it was very, very valuable to make sure that all of my students had a good baseline boot camp, as I like to call it, of how to set up their machine to have the best and smoothest free motion quilting experience, because then that way the moment that they dive into their actual style and their polishing of their skills, they know that their machine is not going to derail the process. So I have an entire section of a boot camp where I do a tension demonstration, again linked with a QR code so it's ready for you to watch and follow along with. Then the next section, we talk about um, different wingmen, which we'll go deep into that in the class. So watch for that. We'll also talk about the singular elements. So this is a really, really great part about breaking down the style of graffiti quilting into very, very simple elements that we build back together. And then this next section I'm super excited about because there's more than 300 illustrations using each of those motifs and different ways that you can combine them. Now, the thing that is so cool about this book is that there are more than 500 illustrations built into the book, and every single one has a link to a video where you can actually watch the process of how I drew out that motif. So that as you're practicing, you can look at the motif in the book, and then you can also watch the video and practice along so that you start to get a better understanding of the path that you would take to quilt that motif. Then in the book, we do some challenging games that will help us to expand our repertoire with quilting and how to use graffiti quilting in a really fun and exciting way. We'll talk about analyzing different spaces of our quilt and how to decide which designs go where. Then there's also an entire section that shows you how you can use graffiti quilting in various layouts and compositions so that you can really allow graffiti quilting to enhance your quilts and not just totally take them over. Now, I know that I'm kind of a show off, and my skills really just lie in the free motion quilting. And it's really fun for me, but I also know that sometimes people get a little bit scared of graffiti quilting because when you've worked so hard and so long on a quilt top, sometimes you don't want the quilting to overshadow the work that you've done on the quilt top. So I wanted to show you guys some samples of work that I've done so that you can really see just how expansive the graffiti quilting style can be applied across many different styles of quilts. So let me show you some of my actual samples. So in the class, we'll do a lot of design techniques. So learning how to analyze areas, like I said, and really break things up into very um, digestible pieces. Because right now you're probably just looking at these quilts and thinking, "Oh wow, that is insane. I don't know how I'm ever going to be able to do that." But I really do break down the process into very actionable and simple steps. So we'll talk about different thread types. For instance, you can see this is a variegated thread here. We'll talk about choosing different thread color schemes and how you can apply them. We'll talk about different colors of fabric and how to decide which colors of fabric to use and when. We'll talk about different compositions and how you can start to use graffiti quilting as a supportive feature within your overall composition. We'll talk about other layouts and how you can do them in different directions. We'll talk about choosing brightly colored fabric versus brightly colored thread and how to decide when and where. We'll also talk about traditional versus non-traditional fabrics, things like using silk or hand-dyed fabric. We'll talk about design features such as scale and composition and ratios and proportions. We'll also use some really fun, funky materials so that you can really see how you can use graffiti quilting to your biggest advantage. I'm also really excited to show you the non-traditional materials that I've used in my own work, and I'm super pumped to see what you guys do with yours as well. There are so many different fabric types out there, so to be able to explore them all is just really fun. We'll also talk a little bit about embellishments and how you can use graffiti quilting in different avenues. For instance, instead of just fabric and thread, we'll talk about how you can use them for couching or even how to use them in non-quilty projects, which is a lot of fun. And then we'll also talk about the whole spectrum of layouts and formulas and how you can really cater graffiti quilting to your comfort level. You know, I find a lot of times when I show my graffiti quilting quilts to people, they'll say like, "Oh, that's just too overwhelming. I need a block to interpret, or I need some borders, or I need a sashing that can really like make the quilting make sense to me." Um, but that's the really cool thing about graffiti quilting, and especially with the new book, is that I have really fleshed out every little detail as to how you can cater the overall technique and integrate it into the style and type of quilting that you feel most comfortable with. So we will learn layouts even as organized and beautiful as like a mandala. And then let me show you this final one. Oh, this is one of my very favorites. So this might look like a computerized design, but it totally isn't. It's all free motion quilted. And when we go through the class, I will show you how to break down your fabric in a way that you can have it organized enough to really plan out your quilt. But you don't have to plan it out so much that you're scared to get started. You can plan it out just enough that it'll keep you going on your free motion quilting journey. Now, you may just be thinking after seeing all of these samples that graffiti quilting is just for small little wall hangings. So let me show you 4 functional quilts that use graffiti quilting so you can really see the expansive range that you can apply them to. So this one is a custom printed quilt top from Honest Fabric. It's designed by Tara Lee Quiltery. It's called Chroma. And this is a really great example of using graffiti quilting on a functional quilt. On the back of this quilt, I used fleece. So it's nice and snuggly, even though the quilting is fairly dense. Now, the other thing that is really, really super cool about my book is that it also includes 30 free motion fillers. So let me show those to you. So this quilt is perfect as the cover quilt for the book because it showcases basically everything in the new book. So you can see in the middle here, I have some beautiful graffiti quilting. And then around the edges are 30 different free motion filler designs. So like I said, even if you're not integrating graffiti quilting into every single quilt that you make, there are so many fillers that can help you on your journey. And every single page in the filler section has a QR code that will lead you to a video that shows the drawing of the page as well as the quilting of the quilt with that free motion filler design. And there's 30 of them to pick from. How cool is that? So it's kind of funny because that was one of the things that like the quilt police said to me when I first started doing graffiti quilting is they'd say, "Oh, that's beautiful and all, but I only make functional quilts that keep people warm and serve a purpose and are not just pretty things." And I'm like, "Okay, well, challenge accepted." So let me show you another one. So this is another custom printed quilt top from Honest Fabric. It's called Color Box. And this time I used graffiti quilting as an edge to edge design. So it provides all of that beautiful texture and quilting without detracting from the quilt top design. And I used fleece on the back of this as well. So it's really, really super soft and snuggly. So you can start to apply your graffiti quilting techniques onto functional quilts where they don't detract from all of that beautiful work on the quilt top that you've worked so hard on, but they can still provide this gorgeous texture that when you look closer at your quilt, you have all of that interest there too. Now, another really cool quilt that I want to show you is called Starlight. And again, this is where I used graffiti quilting and this time instead of doing an edge to edge, I actually interpreted that quilt top design. So in class, we will talk about how to do primary and secondary interpretive quilting, which means we interpret the quilt top and we allow the quilting to enhance the quilt top instead of trying to steal the show. And then this last quilt I want to show you is very special to me. It's one of my favorites. You'll be able to read the story about it in the book. But this quilt is extra fun because the back is just a soft, fuzzy fleece blanket that I got from Walmart. And the front is pieced. So I pieced this quilt. And when I was quilting it, I didn't want the piecing to be detracted from, but I did still really want beautiful quilting texture. So I used invisible thread, which we also will talk about in class on how you can use invisible thread. And this time I interpreted the design to enhance the piecing, and then I did graffiti quilting around the edges. So you can see that I really just leaned into the free motion graffiti quilting style to enhance the quilting. And you can see the quilting really beautifully on the back of the quilt as well. So in the center of this quilt, I interpreted the piecing blocks and I did a center motif radiating outwards. And then as I got towards the edge of the quilt, I chose my stopping point. And then, so you can see the design here. And then I did graffiti quilting with random motifs going throughout the edge. So graffiti quilting really can be applied to so many different types of quilts. And then the final chapter in the book is an entire portfolio of all of the different graffiti quilts that I've done over the last 10 years. And again, every single quilt will have a QR code that links to my website where you can get tons and tons of additional content on that particular quilt. Lots of the quilt, I have process videos so you can actually watch me make the quilt or make portions of the quilt so that you can really get a deep dive into it. It's almost as if you're sitting in my studio watching over the last 10 years of my life as I have made these different quilts. It really is so cool. I'm so excited to share it with you guys. I also realized that with free motion quilting, you may have a different machine than somebody else. So, in the class for graffiti quilting, I will be demonstrating not only on a mid arm sit down machine, but also a long arm stand up machine and a domestic sewing machine. So, any machine that allows you to free motion quilt means that you can take this class. You can work through the content at your own pace as well. You can either binge all of it and just say, family, don't talk to me for 2 days and I'm going to work through all of this content. Or you can really savor the flavors and really break things down and pull things out and apply them in ways that you can really focus on each of those techniques as you are doing your normal quilty routine. Now, even though my class is online and all of the content is hosted on the internet, I always like to make sure that I'm connecting with my students as well. So, when you register for the class, you will get a wonderful welcome package that will not only include the actual book, but a bunch of other goodies as well. You'll get some stickers, an enamel pin, some graffiti quilting postcards, and then even some custom printed fabric with graffiti quilting on it that will help you as you are practicing your free motion quilting. Now, the other amazing thing about all of this is that once you have the book, you have lifetime access. All you have to do is log into your account at karleeporter.com. And then when you scan those QR codes, you'll be able to access all of that content. So whether you're taking this class in 2024 or 2034, you'll be able to have lifetime access as you work through your free motion quilting journey. As your skills sharpen, you'll be able to continue accessing all of this valuable content to encourage you to be the best quilter that you can be. On top of the lifetime access, I will also do a private Facebook group for all the students where I do quarterly Q&As. So, whenever you decide to start working through the class and sharpening your skills, if you have specific questions that you really want me to address, you can email them to me and then every quarter I will do a Q&A kind of sit and sew where we just talk about free motion quilting and I can really help you with whatever thing you're working through or a skill that you're trying to sharpen. I want to be your biggest cheerleader and I want to hold your hand. I really will do my best to hold your hand through this process because over the last 10 years of my own quilting journey, I wish that I had someone to do that for me. So let me teach you in 3 to 6 months what it took me 10 years to learn. I want to be your biggest cheerleader, your biggest advocate. I want to be the person that helps you to just continue to stay motivated as you sharpen your quilting skills. If it's not obvious by this video, I don't know how else to convey it, but I just truly love quilting so much. I have so much love for the process and for the intangible energy that it brings, the ability to really touch and bless people's lives by making something beautiful and functional and warming. I love it so much. And I have been so grateful to be able to connect with other quilters who love it as much as I do. And my big goal in life is to just help people be the best quilter that they want to be as I continue to grow my own skills so that I can be the best quilter that I want to be as well. Over the last 10 years, as I've traveled the world Teaching graffiti quilting and sharpening my own skills, I just feel like I have learned so much and I have so much to give and so much to offer to anyone who wants to become a better free motion quilter. And one thing that I've learned through this process is that I think as quilters, we already have pretty good taste of things that we know look good or don't look good. But sometimes it can be really frustrating when our taste is up here and our skills to execute that taste are down here. So, my goal is to help you elevate your skills so that when you have something in your brain or in your heart that you feel like you're aching to get out and manifest into something tangible like a quilt, I want to help you close that gap so that you can get there, so that you can have a sustainable quilting journey where you can dream any quilt up and then your hands and your shoulders and your body and your brain can actually execute that thing to make a masterpiece. I have worked so hard over the last 10 years and especially over just the last year to really compile the most comprehensive educational experience for free motion quilters. I am really proud of it. And I think that if you're going to take any free motion quilting class, if you could only pick one, I hope that you pick this one. And even if you don't plan to apply the graffiti quilting aesthetic to every single quilt that you make, this course is so comprehensive that it will give you all of the individual building blocks that you can pull from and apply however you see fit. So even if you're like, okay, I'm getting tired of having to constantly mix and match my motifs and I would like something a little more structured, the cool thing about this is that that all exists because graffiti quilting is so all encompassing when it comes to learning free motion quilting motifs. Because if you can combine 25 motifs into one quilt, then that also means you could pull out one or two or three or five of those motifs and use them on their own. Now, I call this a masterclass not because it's geared towards advanced quilters. Whether you have been quilting for 2 weeks or 2 decades, there truly is something for everybody. There's like I'm still exploring new avenues of quilting all the time, and I've been doing this for 10 years. So whether you consider yourself a newbie or a novice or an intermediate or advanced, or you're like a quilt competition prize winner, there's really room for all of us, and there's really room for all different types of ways to explore those techniques and manifest them. The other thing that's so amazing is that we're not just going to make one quilt in our life. Hopefully, we'll make lots of quilts. And so to be able to explore all kinds of different techniques just elevates our skills as a whole. So finally, to kind of round out this video for you guys, I wanted to really emphasize how much I really love quilting and how much I love being able to connect with other quilters as we all use our hands and our heart and our brains to manifest this type of love that we go out and share with the world. In the back of my book is a poem that I wrote about quilting, and I wanted to share it with you guys. It's called Creative Alchemy. The pieces of a quilt top are all my emotions, sorted, split, and spliced just to reunite. Each a new addition in a complicated assortment until each piece feels like it's just right. The thread is a roller coaster, a conglomeration of where I have been and where I've still yet to go. Each thread is meticulously guided in place, and when you see it, you just assume it so. The batting is never seen, but incredibly felt. It is the words that can simply go unspoken. Each wave of warmth given through loft and drape is the real tongue that utters love's token. A quilt is much more than the sum of its parts, it's love manifested and set tangibly in place. It's a fragment of a heart, encouragement on a journey, bound together with well wishes it's laced. A quilt is a conduit, a transference of energy, and can carry significant power. It transforms material and skill through creative alchemy into adoration, hour by hour by hour. So when you're given a quilt, there's so much more than meets the eye. It's not just scraps and stitches in one single day. It will keep you warm while you laugh, love, grieve, and cry, a memento to comfort you on your way. To register for the class, just go to karleeporter.com and click on the Shop Education tab for all of the information. Happy quilting, you guys. If you want to be the best quilter you can be, let me help you achieve all of your quilty dreams. See you in class.